morning, everybody. Today we're going to be reading chapter 12 in your Farmer Boy book, which is called Tin Peddler. Tin as in T-I-N, peddler. Now, this possibly is going to be a brand new concept for you, just like a lot of things in Farmer Boy. But peddling means like bartering and trading. So we are going to be hearing about somebody who's going to be coming to the Wilder home and coming to see if they have anything that they would want to purchase. Okay, so peddlers can sometimes be just like selling random things, but in this case, it's going to be kind of a version of selling, but really more of a trade. Somebody has a bunch of these tin items, meaning made of a tin sort of material. And that includes some saucepans and cups, etc. A lot of kitchen items. And he's going to come by and see if the Wilders want to buy anything. Now, one evening after sunset, Almanzo saw a white horse pulling a large, bright red cart up the road. And he yelled, "The Tin Peddler's coming! The Tin Peddler's coming!" Alice ran out of the hen house with her apron full of eggs. Mother and Eliza Jane came to the kitchen door. Royal popped out of the pump house, and the young horses put their heads through the windows of their stalls and whinnied to the big white horse. Now Nick Brown, the Tin Peddler, was a jolly fat man who told stories and sang songs. In the springtime, he went driving along all the country roads, bringing news from far and near. His cart was like a little house, swinging on stout leather straps between four high wheels. It had a door on either side, and from its rear, a platform slanted upward like a bird's tail. There was a fancy railing all around the top of the cart, and the cart and the platform and the wheels were all painted bright red, with beautiful scrolls painted bright yellow. You have a picture of this? A little home on wheels, very fancy little details. High in front rode Nick Brown on a red seat above the rump of the sturdy white horse. This is what he's like. He's got all of these saucepans and skillets and all sorts of kitchen items with him. He's got his horse there, and he's that jolly little plump man. And there's the fancy scrolls at the top and fancy wheels. So, I've skipped ahead to see that picture. Now, Almanzo and Alice and Royal and even Eliza Jane were waiting when the cart stopped by the kitchen porch, and Mother was smiling in the doorway. "How do you do, Mr. Brown?" she called. "Put up your horse and come right in. Supper's almost ready." Do you think they're excited to see him? Yes, they are. So maybe it's because they're wanting some of his things, but also sounds like he's a nice guy. Maybe he's a friend because he comes fairly often. We don't know exactly how much, but maybe once a year he comes through and they welcome him. He's this friend to come visit. So Father called from the barn, "Drive into the buggy house, Nick. There's plenty of room." Almanzo unhitched the sleek big horse and led him to some water. Then he put him in a stall and gave him a double feed of oats and plenty of hay. Mr. Brown carefully curry-combed and brushed him and rubbed him down with clean cloths. He was a good horseman. After that, he looked at all the stock and gave his opinion of it. Nick admired Star and Bright and praised Father's colts. He's a kind man going around and saying, "Wow, look at those colts. They're looking great. Oh, Star and Bright, those are good-looking little calves." He says, "You ought to get a good price for those colts coming 4 years old. For those coming 4-year-olds, he said to Father. "Over by Saranac, the New York buyers are looking for driving horses. One of them paid $200 apiece last week for a team not a mite better than these." Wow, he could get $200 from him? Now, Almanzo could not speak while grown-ups were talking, of course, we know that. But he could listen. He didn't miss anything that Mr. Brown said, and he knew that the best time of all was coming after supper. When do you think that is? Now, Nick Brown could tell more funny stories and sing more songs than any other man. He said so himself, and it was true. Yes, sir, he said. I'll back myself, not alone against any man, but against any crowd of men. I'll tell story for story and sing song for song, as long as you'll bring men up against me. And when they're all done, I'll tell the last story and sing the last song. So he will keep going and going. He can compete against a whole crowd of men in his storytelling and song singing. Father knew that this was true. He had heard Nick Brown do it in Mr. Case's store in Malone. So as soon as he's done with one story, somebody else tries to one-up him. But then Nick Brown has a better story to tell. Somebody else comes along, and Nick Brown still has another story to tell. Do any of you know people like that who are great storytellers, and you just listen to them and you're like, wow. Or maybe it makes you laugh a lot. So fun to hear a good storyteller. So after supper, they all settled down by the heater, and Mr. Brown began. It was after 9 o'clock before anyone went to bed, and Almanzo's sides ached with laughing. Next morning after breakfast, Mr. Brown hitched the white horse to the cart and drove it up to the kitchen porch, and he opened the red doors. Inside the cart was everything ever made of tin. On shelves along the walls were nests of bright tin pails and pans and basins and cake pans, pie pans, bread pans, and dish pans. Overhead dangled cups and dippers, skimmers and strainers, steamers, colanders, and graters. Have you ever heard of some of these things? Tin pails and pans. You probably have some of those at home. Maybe you have some pie pans. You probably have like a colander that is to strain things. Let me show you a picture of that. So your parents might use that for like pasta or rice. There were graters, skimmers, and strainers. Some of that is probably for like skimming off the top of the milk for cheese. There were also some tin horns, tin whistles, toy tin dishes, and patty pans. There were all kinds of little animals also made of tin and brightly painted. So a lot of it is just practical kind of kitchen items, but there's also some fun things. Mr. Brown had made all of these himself. So he made all these things that he's selling in the winter time. And every piece was made of good, thick tin, well made and solidly soldered. Soldering is a joining together of two metal things. It's a process that usually involves, let me show you another picture of this. It has to do with like applying heat on the metal to bend it so that it can join together. There's some like more technical soldering, but this is, well, let's see. Yeah, that's wire soldering. So joining two metal pieces together. So he is a good worker. He does a lot of things that are well made. Now, Mother brought the big rag bags from the attic and emptied on the porch floor all of the rags she had saved during the last year. So she's got a bunch of rags. Now, Mr. Brown examined the good, clean rags of wool and linen, while Mother looked at the shining tinware, and they began to trade. For a long time, they talked and argued even. Shining tinware and piles of rags were all over the porch. What do you think those rags are for? Now, for every pile of rags that Nick Brown added to the big pile, Mother asked more tinware than he wanted to trade her. So they're going back and forth. There's this bartering, this trading. Now, Mother says, I'll give you these rags for this amount of tinware. And both of them want more. He wants more rags than she wants to give up, and she wants more tinware than he's willing to give up. Now, they were both having a good time about it, though. They were joking and laughing and trading. At last, Mr. Brown said, well, ma'am, I'll trade you the milk pans and pails and the colander and the skimmer and those 3 baking pans, but not the dish pan. And that's my final offer. Very well, Mr. Brown, Mother said unexpectedly. So Almanzo is thinking she's going to push back again. She's back again, but because she's really strong. But she said, okay, that's a good deal. And she had actually got exactly what she wanted. Almanza knew she didn't even need that dishpan. She had set it out only to bargain with. Wow. So she knew that Mr. Brown wasn't going to give her everything she wanted. So she asked for one extra thing so that he thought, oh, I'm winning by not giving her this thing. But she didn't even want it. He looked surprised. And now Mr. Brown understood what happened. He knows that she got the best of him. He looked surprised and he looked respectfully at Mother. Mother was a good, shrewd trader. Shrewd means like careful with your money and very smart. She had bested Mr. Brown, but he was satisfied too because he got plenty of good rags for his tinware. He gathered up the rags and tied them into a bale, and he heaved the bale onto the slanting platform behind his cart. The platform and the railing around the top of the cart were made to hold the rags he took in trade. Then Mr. Brown rubbed his hands together and looked around, smiling. Well now, he said, I wonder what these young folks would like. He gave Eliza Jane 6 little diamond-shaped patty pans to bake little cakes in. Oh, so that's what a patty pan is. It's for just little tiny cakes. And he gave Alice 6 little heart-shaped ones. So they're probably kind of like a little cupcake tin or muffin tin. And he gave Almanzo a tin horn painted red. They all said, thank you, Mr. Brown. Then Mr. Brown climbed to his high seat and took up the reins. The big white horse stepped out eagerly, well-fed and brushed and rested. The red cart went past the house and lurched into the road, and Mr. Brown began to whistle. Mother had her tinware for that year, and Almanzo had his loud, squawking horn, and Nick Brown rode whistling away between the green trees into the fields. Until he came again next spring, they would remember his news and laugh at his jokes, and behind the horses in the field, Almanzo would whistle the songs he had sung. That's the end of the chapter. So what would you say Nick Brown is like? A very nice guy. He's a good worker, and he's super friendly. So there were a bunch of things that you probably never heard of as far as the items that he was making out of tin. And it's interesting to hear about that trading process as he was going back and forth, bartering with Mother. And who won, do you think? Mother did, because she got exactly what she wanted. But he was happy too. Okay, that is all for your reading today, but I have one last little thing that I want to show you all. In this chapter, there is this literary device used called alliteration quite a bit. Now, alliteration, can you say that with me? Alliteration is the repeated use of certain consonants, like Sally sells seashells. Okay, it's used in like lots of tongue twisters, and it also can make you kind of stop and notice certain parts of writing much more. So let's take a look at some parts of this chapter that had alliteration. Okay, so as you can see here, it says, Mr. Brown rubbed him down with clean cloths. Now, clean cloths is a little snappier than saying like new cloths or clean rags. This may not have been the author's intent to make sure that there were 2 consonants in a row that were both C's, but maybe it was. Let's continue. Next one, it says, Almanzo and Royal put on their coats and caps and mufflers and mittens. That's a good use of alliteration, coats and caps, muffins and mufflers and mittens. Grouping those together really helps to just make your writing sound a little bit more interesting. He blubbered and begged. There's a good example of some alliteration too. He was a big, rough man with a loud voice and a loud laugh. Once again, that repeated consonant. 10 stacks of pancakes rose in tall towers. Almanzo walked whistling behind his team. Or Allison Almanzo, there's also alliteration, but that wasn't the point of doing those two names. That was just their names. They carried pails full of pieces of potatoes. That was from last chapter, or 2 chapters ago. There were tin horns, tin whistles, toy tin dishes, and patty pans. Every piece was a good thick tin, well made and solidly soldered. There's another example, solidly soldered. And Mother was short and plump and pretty. The cold was cruel. All of those are a way of making your writing more interesting. That repetition of the first consonant sound, plump and pretty. Oh, actually, that's why also Allison Almanza wouldn't be alliteration, because those aren't beginning consonant sounds. I think there's a different name for that. But like pieces of potato, solidly soldered, plump and pretty, all different forms of alliteration. As an optional assignment, you could write your own alliteration, and unfortunately my camera is not working, so that was all that we needed to do for today. I will talk to you all soon. Hope you enjoy your day. Bye.